The Montreal Canadiens got some tough news about the future of Carey Price. They also were involved in a trade that brought Monahan to Montreal. Scott Matla of Locked On Canadiens is here to talk about that and all things Montreal Canadiens on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could join us today. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Lots of news over this week concerning the Montreal Canadiens. So we bring in Scott Matla, the co-host of Locked On Canadiens. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's been a hectic end of the week with the world's longest trade condition list as part of the reason why. It's been interesting, though. We've gotten good news, we've got bad news, and everything in between this week in terms of the Canadiens, unfortunately.
Let's get the bad news out of the way. Carey Price, unlikely to play this season. His career, his future in the game up in the air right now. What is the latest that you've heard, and how does this affect the Habs this year and beyond?
The Carey Price thing isn't totally surprising because he rehabbed his knees, been getting platelet injections, and Kent Hughes and everyone who's been asked in the Canadiens organization has said, we're taking it day by day. We'll see. We're getting our updates when he goes to these things. And it's become very clear that just rehabbing and doing platelet injections is not going to be enough to get his knee where it needs to be to play this season without. And the other option then is it requires surgery if he wants to play. And with a knee, and as everyone knows, even with the advancements in modern medicine, a knee injury that is clearly this severe means he's going to be missing this season anyways. And it kind of lends to, is this it for Carey Price? And we haven't heard from him directly. His wife has been collecting well wishes to share with him when he is well and ready, which tells me in typical Carey Price fashion, he has probably gone to a cabin in the woods to go fishing and kind of keep to himself. It's been a very tough 18 months between the run to the Cup final and losing, entering player assistance, and then coming back and then still having to deal with this. I don't want to say definitively that we've seen the last of Carey Price playing in the NHL, but with everything surrounding this, it seems more and more like that's the way it's going to go. And that's heartbreaking for fans like myself who never got to really see a ton of the Habs superstars. Carey Price is probably the closest we've come to having those superstars of the old Montreal dynasties.
What would it mean for the Canadiens not to have him this year? And then, I mean, obviously the team is in a rebuilding mode. Does having him either retire or not be available this year help or hinder them in the long run?
I think my thought is I look at what they did with Jake Allen. They extended him last year or the year before for 2 years at under $3 million to keep him around. They exposed Carey Price in expansion when Seattle was joining the league to be able to keep Jake Allen under contract. And I think they knew that this was always a possibility. They re-signed fan favorite Samuel Montembeault in the offseason to a 1-year deal. They were always prepared for this to be an option. And they loaded up all the way down to the ECHL level. They are loaded up with goaltenders to keep bumping everyone up as needed. And the biggest thing is, and it sounds so harsh and it's not meant to be that way, is Carey Price not being in the lineup is an LTIR cap savings for them that allows them to get Sean Monahan under contract, or not under contract, but under the cap, to sign Kirby Dach, to sign Caden Primo, who's expected to be their AHL starter and goalie of the future. Carey Price's absence helps Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton build towards the rebuild that they want in terms of cap space and flexibility. And that includes Paul Byron, who will also likely go on there. Obviously, Shea Weber is no longer here. He is a Vegas Golden Knight cap casualty. they were always prepared for this, and I just think that a lot of people were really hoping it wouldn't be this way. But unfortunately, hockey's not always fair in that regard. But the Canadiens came prepared for this to be an actual option, and they didn't have to scramble at the last minute to try to put something together right now.
You mentioned Sean Monahan, and you mentioned at the outset all the conditions in this trade. Where does he fit into the lineup, and have you sorted out these conditions?
So I don't know. I legitimately don't know where to put Sean Monahan right now, because you have right now your 1C is Nick Suzuki. That is written in there. That is set in stone. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Jake Evans as your likely fourth line center. In the middle of all that, they have Kirby Dach, they have Christian Dvorak, and now they have Sean Monahan. I anticipate it's not going to be Kirby Dach. I anticipate likely Christian Dvorak getting moved out before the season begins to a team that might be looking for the center depth, and they can kind of free up a little bit more of that cap space. They want to give Kirby Dach a bigger role. They traded a lot for him at the draft, obviously trading Romanov to the New York Islanders, getting a first-round pick in that, and then flipping that to Chicago for Kirby Dach. I don't think he's here for a long time either. This is not like the Kirby Dach trade where they're planning for the future. This is them buying low on a guy, doing Calgary a favor, getting another first-round pick out of all of this, something Kent Hughes has done really well at, and using that to further their rebuild. Because if Monahan comes in and he's actually healthy after his other hip surgery now and is recuperated and regains some semblance of his form, I'm not saying he's going to be a 25, 30 goal guy anymore, but if he pots a dozen goals by the time the trade deadline rolls around, you can flip that to a team who's looking for depth help, and they can basically add more picks to a guy they got for free. They got him for future considerations, which just closes the trade from Michael McNiven to Calgary months and months ago. They traded nothing and got a first-round pick and a guy they can flip for more picks. It's like the Shea Weber and any Dodonov trade. They don't have to keep Dodonov, and they can flip him. It's really, really smart, just business by Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon. And if Monahan plays well and they're open to keeping him, they said they'd be willing to negotiate that. But I still think he's going to be a deadline flip to some team needing depth. And that helps the Canadiens in their quest to get where they want in the ongoing rebuild.
All the conditions attached to this pick. Have you figured out how this works? I mean...
So yes, Nathan Has Eyes on the Prize, the other website I write for, put together an entire draft pick outcome and the best and worst. And looking through everything, the best outcome is that Montreal would receive the 97th overall pick, round 4, pick 1 in 2025, and first overall selection in 2026 if the Flames finish last. There's so many conditions that no matter what, Montreal is getting another first-round pick in either 2024, 2025, or 2026. That's written in and that is done. They, however, can add a fourth, or I believe it's a fifth or a third in one of these other trades, depending on certain conditions, because Florida has so many things tied to the Claude Giroux trade, things that were tied to the Matthew Tkachuk trade. It's the most complex trade I've ever witnessed in my entire life. You can look up the article at Habs Eyes on the Prize, the best and worst draft pick outcomes. It lays it all out better than I could hope to explain, because I know we don't have a ton of time, and it might take me at least 30 minutes to try and work my way through it all. It's insane, and it's no wonder that the trade was announced that it was happening and then officially announced 6 hours later, because it took them this long to negotiate everything out. Just insane.
Not too many NHL trades come with a flow chart, and this one, I think, does.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like like I said, I've never seen a trade tree or a trade that has a flow chart that isn't related to trades off of the trade. This is just one, and it's still, even at its most broken down, still insanely complicated. It's smart business and really good work, but I never want to try and wrap my head around a trade like this again. It's needlessly complicated almost.
Unbelievable. Scott, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find the podcast on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens. We are also on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe there. I am at Scott Matla, SCOTTMATLA, all one word on Twitter. My co-host, who is not here, she is out of town for the day, is at The Active Stick. And if you want to read any Habs-related writing, you can find it at Habs Eyes on the Prize, part of SB Nation. So, Gil, thank you so much for having me on, and hopefully I'll be back soon with better tidings for Habs fans.
All right, Scott, thanks. Always a pleasure. You hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think about calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. I mean, what are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over.